Hi, this is Len Furman, the sports time traveler, with an episode today that takes us back precisely 100 years. It's titled 1924, The Big Train That Could. Subtitle: Something magical is happening in the nation's capital right now, 100 years ago. The sports time traveler has quietly been making daily trips since February, precisely 100 years back in time to 1924, to follow Walter Johnson and the old Washington Senators. Note their official name in 1924 was the Nationals, which was confusing because they played in the American League, and so most people called them by their old name prior to 1905, the Senators. Now, for the first time, I am reporting to you about my travels to 1924, as there is big news to share. Washington, D.C., June 27th, 1924. Here in 1924, the Senators are blessed to have perhaps the greatest pitcher in American League history. He is a man who is a beloved figure, not just here in the capital, but across America. His name is Walter the Big Train Johnson. Johnson debuted with the team late in 1907 at age 19 and has been with the team continuously ever since, now in his 18th season. In his rookie year, he started 12 games and had an ERA of 1.88. He only got better. In his second season, he started 30 games and had an ERA of 1.65. Then, in his prime, in the decade of the 1910s, his statistics were phenomenal. 20 plus wins every season with a high of 36 in 1913. ERA under 2 every year except 1917 when he ballooned to 2.21. At least 6 shutouts each year except 1916 when he only threw 3, and at least 27 complete games every season. For the decade, his record was 265 and 143. Unfortunately for Walter, the rest of the team had a record of 490 and 594 in the 1910s. The Senators have simply not been great during Johnson's entire tenure. At worst, they were simply dreadful, losing 110 games in 1909. At best, they finished second in the league in 1912 and 1913. But they were never truly in contention to win a pennant in either of those years. In 1912, they finished 14 games back. In 1913, they finished only 6.5 games back, but that was deceptive. They were 13 games back with 9 games to play, and an 8-1 finish made it look like a closer race in the record books than it actually was. In 1918, they finished third in a war-shortened 128-game season that ended on September 2nd. But like 1913, they never really contended. With 10 games to go, they were 6 games back, and they were never higher than third place all season. All the other years of Johnson's career, the Senators were at least 17 games back at season's end. And at no time in Walter Johnson's entire career up to this point were the Senators in first place during the summer. The latest they had been in first place during Johnson's first 17 seasons was 10 years ago on June 8th, 1914, nearly 2 weeks prior to the start of summer. And through 1923, the Senators never saw first place again at any time since after the month of May. The Senators were so awful year in, year out, that on April 30th, 1921, the Washington Times-Herald printed these infamous words about the hometown club. Washington, first in war, first in peace, last in the American League. It was an oft-repeated joke that could be found in Washington newspapers going as far back as Johnson's rookie year of 1907. The 1924 season outlook. Prior to the 1924 season, the Senators' prospects appeared dim as usual. The American League was owned by Babe Ruth and the New York Yankees. The Yanks had won the pennant in 1921 and 1922, and then last year in 1923, playing in the brand new Yankee Stadium, they won the pennant a third straight time and upped their status from American League champions to World Series champions by defeating the New York Giants 4-2. The Yankees dominated the American League last year. They finished 15 games ahead of the second place team in 1923. The Yankees entered the season in 1924 as the heavy favorites to win the pennant again. The big train considers retirement. Meanwhile, Walter Johnson of the lowly Senators at age 36 was considering retiring. Johnson had not been the same overpowering pitcher in the early 1920s that he had been in the 1910s. In 1920, injuries forced him to miss the second half of the season. In the 1921 to 1923 seasons, he never won more than 17 games and never had an ERA below 2.99. He was good, but far off his marks from the prior decade. Then the news came out during the offseason that Johnson had signed a contract to play one more season in 1924. It is generally expected that this year will be his last in the majors. Across the country, sports writers have lamented that Walter Johnson will never get to pitch in the World Series. On February 11, 1924, the New York Daily News wrote this about Johnson. It has always been the ambition of Johnson to pitch in a World Series, but his hopes never were realized, and now it looks as if the Senators will not win their first American League pennant before Walter's skill and strength, now waning, are memories. On March 1st, 1924, the Pittsburgh Post included a piece I have included in the written version of this Substack article, which demonstrates how much he is revered, even in cities in which he has never pitched. The article includes this passage about how Johnson will be thought of after he retires at the end of the season. The national sport will lose one of its real drawing cards, also a man who has been a credit to the game. Someday, the history of Walter Johnson will be written. It should be written, and also read by every boy in the country. He never took a drink of intoxicating liquor in his life, never smoked, or even chewed tobacco. Towards the end of March, a story came out that Johnson was definitely going to retire after the 1924 season, and it ran in newspapers throughout America. The prevailing thought before the start of the season was that poor Walter would never pitch in a World Series, as his 1924 Senators club appeared to have little to no chance to be competitive. A Wire story that came out on March 28, 1924, and appeared in the Seattle Union Record is included in the written version of the Substack article. Here's a portion of the article. Walter Johnson must have given up all dreams of pitching in a World Series. The Washington Senators are not going to win any pennants, barring 2 or 3 of those miracles. Johnson looked great in spring training. Those who saw Johnson play in spring training in Tampa noted that he was looking better than he had in years. I have an article in the written version of the Substack platform here that appeared in the Tampa Tribune on March 28, 1924, indicating that Johnson appears to be in mid-season form. It also cited the usual wishful thinking of club owners dreaming about their team's prospects for success in the upcoming campaign. In addition, there was a note about the new manager of the Senators, Harris. That's Stanley Bucky Harris, who has been given the reins of the club at just age 27 to be the player manager. He's the youngest manager in baseball history to this point. Harris has been the team's regular second baseman since 1920. I'm going to read the portion of the article here that's in the Substack. Walter Johnson, war-scarred veteran of 17 campaigns as a member of the Washington Senators, is displaying mid-season form and has given Griffith's club an air of confidence. That's owner Clark Griffith. Griffith feels confident the Senators are going to cause considerable trouble in the American League this summer. Johnson's fastball is working in great style this spring and has given Stanley Harris, the new manager, much confidence. Harris is sure his big speedball pitcher is in for a great year. When the Senators were checked in their winning streak after 5 games, Johnson was nominated to start the club on its feet again, trimming the New York Giants. Yet another article appeared on March 28, 1924, this one in the other Tampa paper, the Tampa Times, which further attested to the impact Walter Johnson has made on people's hearts during his 17 years playing ball. Here's one of the key passages. Walter Johnson, the most admired ball player of the fans in this part of the world, the star without a pennant, is the great honor at Tampa whenever there is a function that admits of a speech by an athlete. The article was titled, Big Train Has Everything But a Championship. Pennant would fill perfect career of great pitcher. Play ball. The 1924 season begins. Opening day of the 1924 season was on Tuesday, April 15th. President Coolidge tossed out the first pitch at Griffith Stadium in Washington, D.C., and Walter Johnson looked sensational. He pitched a shutout. But the victory was not followed by many others. The Senators finished the month of April at 5-8. In May, the team played a game over 500 ball and finished the month with a record of 17-19. Johnson started May looking very average. On May 14th, he lasted just 4 innings and a loss at home to the Indians. His record stood at 4-3 and his ERA was 2.90. Then on May 23rd, he shut out the White Sox on 1 hit while racking up 14 strikeouts. It was a gem. Lewis Dower of the Washington Times-Herald wrote, "In Florida, Johnson gave every sign of being in better condition in years, but in his starts before yesterday, he had not lived up to those Florida promises. Yesterday, however, he was the Walter Johnson of 1912 and 1913. And you can see the article by Lewis Dower in the Substack written version of the article. The headline is, Walter Johnson Twirls Magnificent Game. The big train ride gets bumpy. But Johnson's great game on May 24th was followed up by a poor outing. He lasted only 2 innings at home against the Yankees in the rain on May 28th. The Washington Herald noted the big train was not himself. And I have a clipping of the article posted, which further goes on to say, the fastball with which he turned back the White Sox last Friday was sadly lacking, while his twisting curve was applesauce for the bludgeon swingers of Murderers Row. And then, in his next outing, Johnson gave up 5 runs in 5 innings in Boston. Johnson finished the month of May with a record of 5-3 and an ERA now up to 3.27. In the next 2 innings, he bounced back with complete game victories, including a shutout of the Tigers on June 6th, his 3rd shutout of the year. Revered across America. Regardless of his performance in his 18th and likely final season, Johnson is receiving great adulations day after day in newspapers around the nation. On June 4th, the Spokane Press wrote a wonderful article that I have posted in the written version below about Walter Johnson. In Spokane, on the other side of the continent, he was praised as if he was the hometown hero. The paper wrote, "There was never a more popular idol than Johnson. Even partisan fans hate to see their favorite team beat him. Every American League player has the greatest admiration for Walter Johnson." I'm going to read the clipping of the article that I've included. It's very touching. Why has Walter Johnson lasted so long as a big league pitcher? That is the question oft put by the inquiring fan because Johnson is a great favorite. In all probability, there was never a more popular idol than Johnson. Even partisan fans hate to see their favorite team beat him. However, the greatest test of a player's popularity is measured among his fellow players. It is not putting it too strongly to say that every American League player has the greatest admiration for Walter Johnson. 18 years ago, Johnson made his American League debut, an unknown rookie. His pitching made him famous overnight. He has consistently held that fame by his sterling performances and his likable manner. Of the players who were in the American League when Johnson made his debut, Ty Cobb alone remains. The Senators continue to meander. The Senators started the month of June losing 5 of 9, and their record dropped to 21-24 on June 10th. Here were the standings in the American League after the games of June 10th. First place, New York Yankees, 25-18. Second place, Boston Red Sox, also 25-18, actually tied for first. Third place, Detroit Tigers, 27-22. Fourth place, St. Louis Browns, 23-23. Fifth place, Washington Senators, 21-24. Tied for fifth place in terms of games back, Chicago White Sox, 20-23. Seventh place, Cleveland Indians, 19-24. Eighth place, Philadelphia A's, 18-26. It looked very much like a typical Senators season as they were mired in fifth place. And then something magical begins. Quite inexplicably, on June 11th, the Senators, who were in the middle of a 3-week road trip, started to win games more consistently. That day, they bombed the Browns in St. Louis 12-1. 23-year-old Goose Goslin hit a home run in the 8th and drove in 3 runs for the Senators. Goslin, who led the American League in triples last year with 18, raised his batting average to .333. The Senators won again the next day, with Johnson getting another victory to raise his record to 8-3. And they made it a sweep of the Browns a day later to reach 500 at 24-24. The Senators lost close games in Chicago the next 2 days to drop their record back to 24-26. Then, starting on Tuesday, June 17th, they reeled off 5 consecutive wins. Having won 8 out of 10 games, the Senators moved up to third place, 2 games behind the league-leading Yankees at the end of the day on June 22nd. Their next 4 games were scheduled to take place in the new Yankee Stadium that opened last year in 1923. There was such excitement among baseball fans here in Washington that the Evening Star newspaper reported on Tuesday, June 25th, that thousands of people, quote, kept calling the newspaper offices day and night asking for the results of the game, end quote. Those games were in New York. The Evening Star further reported about a throng of people that followed the score of the game as it was posted outside their building. Here's a clipping from the Evening Star paper on June 25th, 1924. The Star building was black with people yesterday afternoon, braving the scorching heat to watch the scores as they were posted inning by inning. When the 9th session found the score tied 3-3, the tension was almost at the breaking point. And when the result was finally announced at the end of the 10th, the roar of joy that went up from the throng could be heard for blocks, rivaling the cheers that have rocked the baseball park itself on its most prosperous days. The Senators kept on winning and winning in New York. They swept the New York Yankees. As best as the Washington sports writers could recall, it was the first time the Senators had ever taken 4 straight from the Yankees. It was also the first time the Yankees had lost 4 straight at the new Yankee Stadium. The sweep of the Yankees vaulted the Washington Senators into first place in the American League. It was the first time the Senators had ever been in first place during the summer in franchise history. And now the Senators were finally coming home after 3 weeks on the road. Yesterday, June 26th, was the homecoming day. An informal baseball holiday was declared in Washington, D.C., as reported on the front page of today's Washington Herald. The title was Capitals Give Team Leading League Royal Homecoming. Business cast aside as fans turn out for baseball holiday. A record crowd estimated at 30,000 came out to Griffith Stadium for a Thursday afternoon doubleheader against the A's. The Washington Times-Herald reported that, quote, a buzz of excitement pervaded the ballpark. Each man was there to do his bit to inspire the team to further clinch its hold on first place. The Senators players received a welcome akin to that of conquering armies of ancient civilizations. The Times-Herald reported the heroes were ushered onto the field through a pathway of roses strewn by beautiful young women in Grecian costumes. President Coolidge decided to attend the game with his wife and 2 children. While his wife and kids made it in time to see the first game of the doubleheader, the president, escorted by the Secret Service, was late and caught only the second game. He missed Walter Johnson pitching the first game. It doesn't get better than this. The game. Walter Johnson faces the Philadelphia Athletics. In the top of the first, Johnson got leadoff batter Max Bishop to ground out to the manager, Bucky Harris, at second base. Then Amos Strunk hit a short liner to left that Goose Goslin grabbed for out number 2. The third A's batter, Paul Strand, stroked a deep line drive to left center that could not be caught. Center fielder Whit Matthews, his throw to third base was wild, and if not for Johnson backing up third baseman Ossie Bluge, Strand would have had an inside-the-park home run. Johnson then stranded Strand on third base as he struck out A's cleanup hitter Joe Hauser. In the bottom of the first, Bucky Harris hit a 2-out double and scored moments later on a Goose Goslin triple. Senators won, A's nothing. End of first inning. Johnson retired the side in order in the top of the second and the top of the third. The Senators also went quietly in the second and third innings. Senators won, A's nothing. End of 3 innings. In the top of the fourth, Johnson got the first 2 batters out. This ran his streak to 9 consecutive batters retired. Joe Hauser of the A's broke the string by hitting a ball to deep left center for a triple. With 2 outs and a man on third base, Johnson faced rookie Al Simmons. Simmons walked. The next batter, Harry Riconda, hit a grounder to Senators shortstop Roger Peckinpah, who got Simmons at second base on the force out. Johnson had gotten out of the inning. The Senators then went down in order in the bottom of the fourth. In the top of the fifth, Johnson gave up a single to A's catcher Cy Perkins. With Perkins on first base and 1 out, Johnson got the A's pitcher Stan Baumgartner to hit a little blooper right back to him. After catching the ball, Johnson whirled and threw to first baseman Joe Judge, and they doubled up Perkins to retire the side. The Senators went down quickly again, batting in the bottom of the fifth. Senators won, A's nothing, end of 5 innings. In the top of the sixth, Johnson faced the top of the A's batting order. He walked Max Bishop. Then Amos Strunk hit a deep drive to right center field. Center fielder Whit Matthews got to the ball for the out, and his throw held Bishop at first base. Paul Strand hit a grounder to short, and Peck flipped it to Bucky to force out Bishop at second. With 2 outs, lefty hitter Joe Hauser reached for an outside pitch from Johnson and slapped it to the opposite field for a single. Then Johnson got the rookie Simmons to fly out to veteran right fielder Sam Rice to retire the A's. The 34-year-old Sam Rice is in his 10th season, all with the Senators. Back in 1920, he led the American League with 63 steals. In the bottom of the 6th, Matthews led off for the Senators with a single, and Bucky Harris reached base when he hit a roller to the pitcher Baumgartner, and the throw to first base was wild. With nobody out and runners on first and second, Harris, the manager, standing on first base, called for Goose Goslin to bunt and move the runners over. Now with the runners on second and third and one out, hard-hitting Joe Judge whacked a double to right field, scoring Matthews and Harris. The Senators had broken the game open. The A's got the next two batters out, but the damage had been done, and Bucky Harris looked like a shrewd strategist. Senators 3, A's nothing, end of 6 innings. The A's looked like they were eager to get back in the game in the top of the 7th. Harry Riconda started off the inning with a single that ricocheted off the glove of third baseman Ozzie Bluge. Then A's shortstop Chick Galloway hit a line drive straight up the middle. Johnson was able to knock it down, pick the ball up, and fire to Peck, who was covering second base, and they got Riconda. After that, Johnson got out of the inning easily as Perkins popped up to Peck, and Baumgartner struck out. The Senators went down in order again in the bottom of the 7th. In the top of the 8th, Johnson got Bishop to pop up to Peck. Strunk singled to center field, but they got Strunk out when Strand hit a grounder to Peck, who threw to Harris covering second. Harris then got the final out when Hauser hit a roller to Harris at second. In the bottom of the 8th, Harris came up with one out and doubled to left field. Goslin walked, putting men on first and second with one out. Joe Judge then hit a single to left, and Harris came home while Goslin stopped at second. So it again was men on first and second and one out for the Senators. The next batter was the catcher, Muddy Rule. The 28-year-old Rule had played for the Yankees and the Red Sox and was now in his second season behind the plate for the Senators. Rule singled to center field, scoring Goslin, but Joe Judge was caught at third base for the second out. Then Peck fouled out to the catcher Perkins. But the Senators had scored 2 more runs and now had a commanding 5-run lead for Walter Johnson going into the final frame. In the top of the 9th, the leadoff batter was the rookie Al Simmons. He singled. Then Riconda singled. The A's had men on first and second with no outs. The next batter, shortstop Chick Galloway, hit a line drive to left. It was a pivotal moment. Racing over came Goose Goslin, and he made the catch. With one out and 2 A's on base, catcher Cy Perkins came up. He hit a grounder towards Bluge at third base. Bluge made the play to first base to get the second out, while both runners moved up. Now there were A's on second and third with 2 outs. With the pitcher due up, A's manager and owner, Connie Mack, brought in pinch hitter Sammy Hale. In a fitting finale, Johnson struck out Hale to end the game and preserve his shutout. It was the 105th shutout in the grand career of the Big Train. Senators 5, A's nothing, final score. The Big Train had delivered in one of the biggest games of his career to date. It was the 10th straight victory for the Senators. It was the first time Walter Johnson had ever pitched in Washington when his team was in first place during the summer, and he had pitched a shutout in front of a packed house. The president. Unfortunately, President Coolidge had not been there to see the first game. The president did arrive in time to watch the second game. He was, quote, implored to exercise his throwing arm, end quote, according to the Washington Herald. He tossed out a brand new baseball that found its way into the rear pocket of umpire Ormsby. The Herald described President Coolidge as, quote, looking cool as a cucumber in his light gray suit with a white boutonniere in the left lapel and wearing a straight-brimmed straw hat. Coolidge also had the effect of cooling off the hot Senators. In the second game of the doubleheader, the A's' Eddie Rommel held the Senators to just 2 hits, and he beat them 1-0 to end the winning streak. The game lasted just 1 hour and 17 minutes. The entire doubleheader, plus pregame festivities, took all of 4.5 hours. The loss and the end of the streak couldn't spoil the Washington fans' delirious state. Francis Daly, who wrote the front page article in today's Washington Herald, reported that manager Bucky Harris, quote, and all his well-oiled machine were accorded a continuous demonstration throughout the afternoon that was unsurpassed in the history of the game in Washington. It was a great afternoon. The results of the first game of the doubleheader were celebrated in the Washington News with a page one banner headline in the evening paper yesterday, which went to press prior to the end of the second game. The headline of the Washington News was "Record crowd of 30,000 cheers Griffs in 10th straight victory." They call them the Griffs because oftentimes, back here 100 years ago, teams are referred to by the owner's name or owner's nickname. In this case, the Griffs, referring to Clark Griffith, owner of the Senators. Here are the standings in the American League as of this morning, June 27th, 1924. First place, Washington Senators, 34-27. Second place, Detroit Tigers, 35-30. Third place, Boston Red Sox, 31-27. Fourth place, New York Yankees, 30-28. Fifth place, St. Louis Browns, 30-29. Sixth place, Cleveland Indians, 30-31. Seventh place, Chicago White Sox, 29-31. And eighth place, Philadelphia A's, 22-38. And in the written version of the Substack article, I also have a little clipping that shows the batting statistics of the first place Senators. Among the regulars, Goose Goslin leads the team with 51 RBIs and a .344 batting average. Walter Johnson now has a record of 10-3 with 4 shutouts and an ERA that is down to 2.79. And the big train is batting .311 as well. After the game, Bill Price, writing in the evening edition of the Washington Herald that came out yesterday, June 26, 1924, had this to say about the beloved great old man, Walter Johnson. Wouldn't it be thrilling to see this great old man of the baseball world, backed by young and husky teammates, flinging his way to a national pennant against the team that wins in the National League? We can help make this picture a real one by sticking by our team through thick and thin, ups and downs, always cheering them on to do their best. The Sports Time Traveler will continue making daily trips back precisely 100 years to see how long the old Washington Senators can hold on to first place in 1924. Thanks for listening.